Welcome to the Rhythm Changes podcast, where we get to know creative, improvising, local music people. I'm your host and the founder of Rhythm Changes, Will Chernoff. Today we tackle 3 classic musician problems: being too hard on yourself, work-time balance, and avoiding burnout. We also shout out one of our favorite local jazz guitarists, and I throw in one more shout out towards the end to one of my biggest mentors of all time. So please stick around for that and come enjoy a relaxing conversation between 2 jazz friends and collaborators. Our guest today is a young vocalist, multi-instrumentalist, arranger, and educator. He released his first album titled The Boy Next Door in 2019, which got funding from Creative BC and plenty of CBC radio airplay. On top of that, he's published several arrangements for vocal jazz ensembles, and when he does that, he sings, produces the recording, and the video. He holds a Bachelor's of Music and Education, graduating from Capilano University and training at the University of British Columbia. You can find him on Facebook and Instagram at WillClem Music. I'm lucky to have him on my newest single, a song called Don't Miss Me, which he sang and co-wrote. But more than that, I'm lucky to share a first name and last initial with him. So we welcome to the Rhythm Changes podcast, Will Clements.
Hello! Oh my goodness. That was the hypest you weren't kidding. That was a serious intro.
How are you, my friend?
I'm good. You know, I had a bit of a frustrating week, as we spoke to a bit about before, about just trying to get some new projects on the road, but I'm doing much better now that some of those hiccups are done with, and I'm excited. I haven't really gotten to enjoy summer yet, just because I'm still in classes for the next week and a bit. So I'm slowly starting to make more time to get outside, which I'm loving. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm pretty good. I have been enjoying the summer, fortunately, but one thing that's been on my mind is I've been struggling with my work time boundaries. You know, it creeps into my family life and I can't get away sometimes. How are you feeling about work time balancing these days?
I had a really intense year doing a bachelor program in 11 months for this ed degree. And we didn't really have a break. Like, we had 2 weeks in Christmas and then 2 weeks for spring break. I could go on about this all day, but long story short, like, we went through exam breaks. Like, it was just like pedal to the metal trying to get this program over with. So I haven't had a lot of time to like have fun this year, unfortunately. And I'm really happy that part of my life is slowly coming back now, as I get more outside and go paddle boarding and kayaking and biking and stuff. That's some of the stuff I really fell in love with last year that I'd really like to get back into. So it's been hard. It's been really hard, you know? How have you been doing with the staying inside all this year, especially in Vancouver?
Yeah, over the winter it's tough, but now, you know, I can string together a week and it's like there's a gig that I could go to every night if I wanted to, which is so cool.
It's crazy how fast it's like relaunched again, right? The music scene. I'm kind of overwhelmed by it as well.
I think of you as an extrovert. Would you agree?
I would agree with that, but this year, I don't know. It's made me question everything. I find I'll hang out with someone for about an hour now and I'll feel kind of like, okay, yeah, I had my, like, we're good here. Like, we had a good time. I'm ready to go home and like watch some Netflix or whatever. You know, I don't know. Like, I feel like it's kind of, I don't know. Like, I used to be very binary in that way. Like, oh, yeah, I'm an extrovert. This person's an introvert. And now I feel like everything's kind of melding a little bit. Do you get that too? Do you feel kind of overwhelmed when you see someone now, like in person?
I've always felt 50-50, right down the middle, introvert versus extrovert. Be curious what you think too, because you've known me for several years at this point. But I mean, I have always identified with parts of both. On one hand, I say that my favorite thing of all about working in music is the time before a gig, during the intermission, and after the gig. But on the other hand, I'm very happy to get home after that stuff is done. So I'm not sure,
50-50. I would agree with that for you. I think you're someone who's extremely independent and very self-sufficient and probably values, I would assume, your alone time a lot, but who's also very comfortable in a group setting, I think.
Yeah. And then the uncharitable side of it, I guess, is that sometimes I try too hard to do unnecessary stuff to put myself out there, Sometimes I can fall into that. And then sometimes on the introverted side, I'm not willing to go to something that I would obviously enjoy because I overthink it.
Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. I have friends who actually feel like that binary is just not a thing, and I don't know. It's interesting. I've kind of learned a lot in the recent years about I don't know. I used to have a very kind of shallow opinion that shy people are introverted, and quickly realized in college that there's many people who love socializing and are able to do that very seamlessly and easily, but who get really exhausted by that, which I thought was kind of interesting. I don't know. I every time that topic comes up, I'm kind of, I come at it with a new lens and think, like you say, maybe we're all kind of 50-50 to some degree, and just have different comfort levels. I don't know.
You mentioned college, Capilano University. You've had a bit of time to look back on it now. How do you reflect on that period of time right now?
I am really proud of myself. I gotta be honest. I remember being there. I remember first year sitting in the first class and there were 50 people in the class, and it was I think it was a combo class lecture or something. And I remember there was a professor and he was just writing changes on the board. And I remember just feeling like I don't belong here. I don't know what's going on. Despite my many adventures in creativity and music in high school, I felt quite behind on my theory. And I think I was almost kind of embarrassed by that because my dad is a music educator and I kind of felt like I should know more and be more proficient in certain things. So I really, really struggled just with my own inner saboteur, just kind of really couldn't cope with that for a while. And then I started to realize that everyone there had their own unique challenges and their own struggles, like everyone in life, right? And this kind of constructed idea I had that everybody was better than me slowly started to kind of dissipate the more I got to know people and realized oh, this person really is an amazing sax player and improviser, but maybe they're like me, they struggle with a bit of theory or ear training or whatever it is, and I was able to kind of slowly start to accept my gifts. And it took a long time. I would say about maybe midway through fourth year, I wasn't worried anymore about what people thought about me, which that's a long time, 3.5 years to get to that place. Right. But I'm really proud of myself looking back on it, that I was able to get through. I know for a lot of people, music school can be really, maybe deconstructive or, maybe challenging in terms of kind of forming your identity if you're a young person. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. Everybody I've talked to from Capilano University's jazz program on this podcast has identified with this theme that you spoke about. So you're absolutely not alone.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say it's anyone's fault or anything. I think it's a mixture of you're a young person. Well, not necessarily. but like for me, I was a young person kind of trying to find my path, and I wasn't even sure, like I really wanted to go into film school for a long time. I actually applied to 2 film programs, and CAP was kind of like my backup, and then I was offered a small scholarship, so I was like, okay, let's try this out, and I thought maybe I would drop out after a year. I really didn't know, and I think what kept me there were my friends. I made so many friends that I still am super close to. And I'm actually really thankful for the cohort I had. It was a very unique cohort. I would look at kind of the older kids and the younger kids. I mean, by cohort, not by not by age, And there were of course always gems in, each cohort, but there was something special about our cohort where we really supported each other. And if I didn't have that, I would have not made it, honestly, and a lot of those people are the people I still collaborate with, that I've just always felt like accepted my zany, weird, experimental self. And I'm very thankful for that. And I would hope that people going into music school would be able to find that as well.
So you mentioned the music theory moment at the beginning that made you feel like you weren't ready and you couldn't do this yet. But then you turned it around. You talked about how you grew into it with your cohort, and by the end of it, you felt comfortable. So with that example of the before where you didn't feel comfortable yet in mind, what's a moment that exemplifies how you did end up feeling comfortable?
I think a turning point for me was when I got into arranging, because before that, theory felt so funny. I did not think this is where we were going to go with this podcast at all, but I'm loving it. This is amazing. Before that, theory felt so foreign to me. I didn't understand the practicality of it. I was like, kind of like, I could hear things in my head. I felt very musical, but like I never really had a process of writing it down. And when you start learning theory, it's kind of like, it's like language, right? Like when you start learning a language, you're like, how is like learning the 10 different ways to say hello in Spanish going to help me speak Spanish? Like we're not going to get very far. But it's only when you start getting later in the process and you start to apply it into different contexts that it starts to really make sense. So when I started arranging, when did they start? I'm trying to remember. I feel like it's definitely 3rd year, but there might have been there was a few opportunities in 2nd year to start doing combo stuff. And that's really when things started clicking for me, when I started to realize how music could be organized and how I could get an idea from thought to paper and convey that for other people to read. And that's kind of what developed into what I did this year, which is a lot of arranging. As you mentioned in that beautiful intro. Oh my gosh, you should do that professionally for people. We should hire you to write bios for people. That's amazing. Do you have that written down, actually?
Oh yeah, I write them down. I have to.
I might have to grab that from you.
I'm going to do them for other people from now on, so you get to see me grow into it. But my heart was beating for that one.
I love it. What a great takeaway, man. What a gift. Yeah, so that's what I kind of spent doing my year on, and I've learned so much from that.
I love that you mentioned that you were a filmmaker when you were a kid and a younger teenager. What did you learn from that you still apply, and what was that like?
Oh, wow. Okay. Definitely like organization and time management, for sure. So now like when I have a project, regardless of what context it is, it's like, great, okay, let's establish some roles here. Let's delegate. Let's figure, I need structure. Like I'm a very structured person. I don't need to be the leader. I don't mind being the follower, and I will support the leader, but there kind of needs to be a bit of a hierarchy for me to function. And I don't mind. I could be at the bottom of that, that pyramid. I'm happy. I just like structure. And I think that's something I learned a lot about in that process, was just like, in order to make a big project and to coordinate people together, there needs to be some sort of a establishment of process, right? And I think as any creative person will quickly realize, the more that you have your ducks in a row, the easier it is to collaborate, in my opinion. I mean, I think I just learned I was such a people's person, and I love collaborating with people. And I was so honored that I got to collaborate with you on this project. And I know that you're like, having known you for so many years, you're a super collaborator. I would call you a super collaborator, because you just make things happen with people. And I think that's so cool. And I respect that so much.
I read that as a teacher, you look to connect music education with emotional development and self-expression. What can you say about that?
With the age group that I'm primarily working with, which is usually high school students, I mean, can you think of a more like transformative time? I don't know. Like, I think that was probably like the biggest place of growth for me, just as in terms of a person, or those formative years. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think over that lifespan is really when we start to see young children become young adults through finding, and you know, like I'm not saying like people know they want to become fire people or medical doctors and such at that age. I'm just talking about people that are like finding music they like, or art they enjoy, or like a hobby or sports or whatever. You know, you start to really see them kind of form their identities. And that's what I find is so beautiful about that age, and being blessed to work in music education with that, and helping people find something they like, and maybe like a new journey to explore in terms of their artistic expression is so exciting for me. Don't you? I mean, that feeling of like when you share something to someone and then they love it, you get that all the time with high school kids, right? Because everything's new to them, right? So as a teacher, that is something I really, it's kind of my mission statement. It's like, how can I help people express themselves creatively and find a, you know, kind of find a microphone, so to speak, in whatever language that means for them. That's really what I'm passionate about doing. And I'm not even done my B.Ed yet. So like, I don't have like any experience to really go off that besides my practicums, but that's really what I'm passionate about right now as a teacher. I don't think obviously that anyone's identity would be like fully cemented into stone in high school, right? Like, because I hope I'm not betraying like a confidence by saying that I remember sitting with you in both our families, and you sharing that you felt kind of a little bit, maybe it's disoriented the right kind of word, like out of high school, right? Like just like trying to because I mean, like as a freelancer and the work you do, right? It's not on a there's no job description for that, right? And it's so beautiful to see you doing what you do now and just going at it full throttle. But that experience of like finding and feeling like you need to be somewhere, maybe, if that, I don't know, like I don't want to speak on behalf of your experience there, but like,
I knew the why, and I knew this is why I'm doing this, because I love to play with these people and ride this wave of creative energy and happiness, right? But I've never really figured out the how. I am always trying to figure out the how, but the why, I have that clear moment of when I figured it out. So even though that's been constant, I've never really figured out the how exactly. I'm still trying to figure that out every day.
No, that's a beautiful way to articulate it. I've had moments when I've realized like, oh, I love to perform with people. Like I remember recording my debut album and feeling like in the studio, like, wow, like these are the right people I'm with right now to make this happen. Like these people are so supportive and loving and, you know, there to help me learn. I remember teaching at band camp and stuff, and like feeling like a lot of things were clicking then in high school to become a teacher. But I don't really see myself yet exclusively as one thing. I'm sure as you do as well, And so, I mean, I've had many why moments in terms of where I feel like I'm at now with my very, very the early stages of my career. I think, though, at the end of the day, it's always about getting to work with people, collaborating with people, learning from people. That's always been a huge thriving force to doing what I love to do. And I mean, like, it's such a privilege to learn from others through this kind of work, like making music or doing arrangements of other people's works and collaborating in that way.
So you've done something several times, speaking of these people whom you get to work with, that I've not had the pleasure to do yet. I may at some point, although I have jammed with him. What's it like to play gigs with Alvin Brendan?
Oh, Alvin. Alvin's like my... I think he would agree with this. I think he's like my jazz brother or jazz husband or whatever it is. Although he cheats on me with a lot of other people, but I'm okay with it. It's an open marriage, Here's the thing about Alvin. He is so talented at any genre. He can play. I haven't seen him do a genre that was like, oh yeah, he's like faking this hard, right? Like, he's so maneuverable, and he makes you feel so safe and sure of yourself. And I mean, I've always appreciated how he's always been there for me as a friend, as a musician, as a fellow student, and he's one of these awesome people that I've met in my cohort. And I just feel lucky every time I get to play with him. And there's many people I feel this way about as well, but I think because we had that experience of growing together in the CAP program, I've always kind of wanted him to be invited as a part of this. Like, when I recorded my album and I wanted to have Jody and Craig on it, there was an element of like, I want Alvin to be there as well, because he's kind of a part of my growth as well. Everything I've learned from him, playing with him, So I am so happy that he gets so much work as a freelance musician, and I'm so happy for him and such a cheerleader of him. And I feel lucky every time I get to play with him. It's always a hoot. We laugh so much. We laugh all the time on the bandstand, and I just feel blessed. I hope you two get to collaborate more, because I mean, I think you two are such meaningful musicians in my life that I think that you two would blow up this world inside out.
Well, thanks for the kind words. I mean, at the Fort Langley Jazz Festival in September, I'm going to be on, and then he's coming on with Amber immediately after. We're going to share a stage back to back. So, and I hope something magical happens there. You should like transition or something, right? Wouldn't that be? I don't know. You two are so cool. I'm such a fan of both of you. Not just your music, but just who you both are as people is, I don't know. Like, I'm very, very conscious about the love that we have all together as musicians here, right? In this industry. And I really think it's important that in order to make good music, we need to be able to connect, right? And support each other, which I think is not always the case, I mean, like, I don't have any individuals I'm gonna throw out here or anything, but like, I just think it's so important to be able to have that connection to make music. Otherwise, it's not going to be as meaningful, right? You know what? It's not like people come in with bad intentions in 99.9% of cases, but people, like, I'm guilty as anybody. overload themselves. And then maybe you can identify with this. I know I get this every week. It's like you commit to a lot of stuff, and then when it comes time to doing those things, you give it your best shot, and then maybe afterwards I'll feel like, oh, I wish I just had carved out enough space to give this thing the attention that it deserves, and I could have really made it more special. And maybe that's what ends up happening.
That's an interesting way of thinking about it. I'm trying more and more to be easy on myself when that kind of a situation happens, when we're overbooked. I think it's so important, if there's anything this year has taught us, which is, we shouldn't be hard on ourselves. Life is short, damn it. Like being overbooked and busy and overloaded, we're doing what we can, right? And like you say, we're all guilty of certain situations happening where we wish we could have put more energy and time into something. But I don't know. I think that we shouldn't beat ourselves up for that kind of a thing. I don't know. That's my 2 cents on that.
I really appreciate you saying that, because that's something that I struggle with a whole bunch. So I'm going to clip that and put it on repeat. I'm going to make it my computer start.
Make it your mantra, man. Seriously, you can't beat yourself up for that. I mean, I don't know. I get it. But we need to cut that out.
What have you learned about what makes an enjoyable, smooth, and great regular restaurant jazz gig?
What makes a smooth? Okay. I was very fortunate to have a reoccurring gig, which you came to. You were a super fan. You were a sweetheart to come check. We gave you the chef's table a couple times.
You got to show up in your own city, right? New West, come on. Piva.
Yeah.
Piva Restaurant. Let's name them. Shout them out. They're great, right?
I feel so, again, lucky, because when they started that series, they came up to me, and the whole process felt like a collaboration. It never felt like, you're going to be here, here's the deal, take it or leave it. It was always a constant collaboration, super transparent and open to ideas. And, I think we really, really felt, before the pandemic, we really felt taken care of. I mean, they would just do things like feed us, which is not a common thing. You'd think in a restaurant, you'd be getting, and most of the time that is the case, but they always took really good care of us, and they always brought us back, which I was really thankful for. But the biggest thing that to this day I'm grateful for about that experience of having that weekly gig going on for months and months and months and months was that Alvin and I grew so much from playing that much together, that consistently. And what started to happen was that I regret, this is kind of something, I always hold on to my binder as a clutch, but there were a couple times where we put that binder away and we put the music away, and one of us would just start going, and it just became a game of just how can we have fun with this? How can we make this surprising and innovative for each other, right? And let's see if I can make up something on the spot here that Alvin can catch on to, and it started to feel like playing catch all of a sudden, right? And again, one of the reasons I love playing with him is just there was always this sense of safety and saying yes to wherever the music was going to go, which, is hard to get to with certain people. Not necessarily because someone's not capable, just on a chemistry level, right? Like a relationship. So I am so grateful for getting that experience to grow with him in those restaurant gigs. And it's kind of spawned our next project, which is going to be coming out later this year, where we wanted to kind of get some of that recorded, because we haven't gone to do that, obviously, this year, had we not set that up. So I'm really excited to be able to bring that to the world soon, through some recordings we were able to do this summer, which I was really thankful for.
I've got a couple of stories that I want to share with the listeners.
Let's hear it. Let's go.
One is about Piva Restaurant and going to see you there, and the other one is about the song we just put out, Don't Miss Me, right?
I'm excited.
First one, when I went to see you and Alvin Brendan on guitar perform at Piva Restaurant in New Westminster, there's something that you guys would always do that just tickled me so much that I always enjoyed. And I would go and hear you multiple times and you would always do this. And I want to describe what this is and why it's so cool to any listeners, whether they're musicians or not. When you play jazz standards, you're basically playing an old song that has been interpreted many different ways, and you have to come up with your own rendition of it, your own spin on it, your own arrangement, how it goes. And part of that is deciding how you're going to start the song, so how you're going to set up the singer, right? That's one thing. But also how you're going to end the song. And at the end of the song, you have to either agree beforehand on how you and your accompanist, you in this case being you, Will, the singer, how you are going to end the song together so that you're on the same page.
If you can remember.
Yes. And
if
then
you can remember what you agreed on, which I never do.
I have absolutely been there where I just blanking, and then I am the cause of the so-called train wreck. and if you're the one who suggested it, you're going to forget it as well, right? So it's always, yeah, anyway. Oh yes, I forget my own things, especially because I perform all my own music, right? So it's nobody's fault but mine if that ends up happening, right? But what you and Alvin do so well, and you do this every time I've seen you perform, is there's this way of ending a song called a turnaround, where you can repeat the last little bit of the song and you can like improvise over it, and you can kind of just go around and around in circles and play and have fun. And then at some point, you have to give each other the side eye and be like, okay, this is how we're getting out of the turnaround. It is now time for me to sing the last lyric and end this song. But there could be like a minute of just improvising around and around together and having fun, stalling the end of the song because you don't want it to end. The turnaround.
Yeah.
And you do this so well. And I give equal credit to both of you because it has to be that way, right? It has to be a two-person thing to make this turn out so well. But I just always thought that was so cool, the way that you and Alvin did these super long and winding and fun turnarounds.
Well, sometimes you just don't want a song to end. And why should it? Right? I remember hearing different recordings of people doing this and thinking like, man, this song is never going to end. It's just going on and on and on. And I love that. I love it when the song is over, but we're still having fun. We're not done with it yet, That's hilarious. I love that you brought that up. That's a beautiful thing that Alvin and I love to share. And you know what? That made me think of something else, because you said something really important there, which was credit. I was told once, everyone I think has this talk. I'm sure you have this talk with somebody. It's not the birds and the bees. It's the how the hell do I negotiate with a client how much I'm supposed to be paid talk, right? You find a friend, someone sits you down and gives you your kind of negotiation strategy. If you're lucky. If not, you figure it out on the fly, right? I had a friend sit me down and tell me their process of doing that, which I will not share here. And they told me that I, as the vocalist, the person whose name is on the bill, should be charging more, taking a bigger cut because it's my name as the brand, which I totally understand, especially if you're doing a ticketed show or you've got a whole band behind you, or, you have a system set up for your name, right? When I play with Alvin, and I'll say this at the gig on the microphone, this guy is working harder than I am right now. I can walk out at any time, go to the washroom, get a drink, get a snack. Music is still going to happen, right? I am working the least here on the bandstand. I get to pick the song most of the time. If I'm feeling nice, I'll let Alvin pick something, Just kidding. At least in that relationship, I've always been against taking a bigger cut because I've always felt like Alvin is working harder than me as the accompanist, right? And I don't even feel like he's really an accompanist. I feel like he's a collaborator up there, right? So I've always, tried to make sure he has that credit. It's not Will Clements at Piva, right? It's Will and Alvin. And, I've always believed in that. Even if I have a trio, I really, really make it a point to give everyone in that group the credit that's deserved, which I feel like is a bit strange in our industry. Again, different than like a ticketed show. People are coming to see Will Clements, what have you, right? Like I'm talking about more like in these smaller duo. I totally understand again where people come from in terms of if they have a strategy for these kinds of things, and you could defend it in any way. But I do like I found that advice I got was interesting because I really quickly realized like I don't know if I agree with that, that notion of like there should be one person that's kind of in front of everyone necessarily all the time. Maybe.
There's a couple things I've got on my mind as you're mentioning this. And one of them is like, I would say I'm known as a young independent artist who is overweight business skills relative to other skills. I wouldn't even say that I'm good at business. I'll just say that like I'm better at it in relative terms to my playing than some other people. But I did not ever have that person, and I never got any advice. Only School of Hard Knocks all the way. And that's why I'm so open about it now, because I never had that, So I think about that a lot.
Yeah, that is interesting. And I mean, of course, like everyone's experience is going to be different depending on their own experiences of what worked for them and what might not work for somebody else. I mean, with this kind of work, there's no easy way of going about it. This is something to this day my dad and I always talk about, is kind of like, what's our strategy for X, Y, and Z, for releasing or for negotiating or for advocating, whatever it is. It's all depending on the time and place and the person, right, of that situation. So there's no like one size fits all scenario for any of these things.
What I got so much advice on though was the social skills and just the interpersonal side of it, because man, that's where I needed the advice so much, is when I was like, oh, I'm afraid to reach out to this person, or I'm afraid to follow up because I haven't heard back about something I need. I've gotten so much, and other things, and music related things and technical things. I've gotten a lot of advice on those things, but the place where I really got advice over the years was on like how to interact with people properly and how to represent yourself well, because that's where I needed the most help.
That's fascinating. Wow. And for you, that's where you felt like you had the most growth?
Oh, yeah. I've actually talked about this. I did a bit of a deep dive on my experience at CAP on my episode of this podcast with David Blake. And basically what I said was, when I look back on it now, the reason why I feel like I left was because I was socially overwhelmed. I was 17 or 18 years old and I just didn't know how to get along with people yet. And sometimes I was just bad, like to deal with. And then sometimes I just didn't know and I couldn't take cues from people and stuff like that. And that just kept adding up. And then in the years following that, I really, with a lot of help from a lot of people, friends and family, I figured that out a little bit more. And then I got more comfortable. But that was hard back then.
I think what you're being so transparent about right now is actually a struggle a lot of people have to varying degrees. I think that maybe what you're talking about manifests itself very differently for different people. And is almost kind of like a disguise a lot, or disguised a lot of the time in terms of learning how to interact with people. And I think as musicians, we're interacting with so many different people all at the same time, that it's, you kind of realize pretty quickly on, oh, I got to figure this out. Like I got to figure out how to connect with people, right? Because word spreads fast, right? So that's interesting. I definitely can agree with you that, when you're a young person, well, again, anybody, but at least for me, when I was a young person, that was something too. I didn't realize maybe that was also a place of growth. And at that same time, I think too, learning to collaborate with people as well.
And then just to bring it back around and finish this thread, you were talking about like giving people the credit and an equal share in your musical ventures when you perform together. I've got 2 examples of that where I've had to think about it, and I would be happy to share to the listeners what I do here, because I want to stick with these things. I'm happy to be accountable on them, and if you ever see me not doing these 2 things I'm about to describe, please tell me and I'll correct myself, and thank you. One of them, this is kind of nerdy though, is neighboring rights. So these are the royalties that your sound recordings earn, which go to the people who performed on the recording, so all the musicians. And in Canada, it gets dealt with through an organization called Resound and through their chapter organizations like MROC or MROC and a couple other ones, depending on what province you're in. And you can have your musicians, if you made the recording, as feature performers or non-feature performers. And on my recordings, everybody is always going to be a feature performer. There's never going to be a point where I'm going to select somebody as non-feature when I fill out that form, because I want everybody to have that credit at a minimum, so that, because that's really, how can you say, right? Like the kind of music that we make especially, but really pretty much all kinds of music, right? Who are you to say who's a feature and a non-feature performer, right? We're all humans who are doing something together. We're all in the room for the same amount of time, probably, right? Especially if it's recorded live. So everybody's a feature performer in my books. That's one thing. And then the other thing is for live, I mean, I wish I could give comprehensive advice about how to get the most revenue, but I can't, because you got to respect the boundaries of the promoters and how they come up with their fee structures. And it's just too variable. So it's hard to give constant advice of like, oh, you should charge this, right? Otherwise I would, if it weren't for those 2 problems. But once I know how much revenue I'm getting from a gig, I will figure out how much money I need to spend to make it really comfortable. And so that will often include booking a rehearsal at a space in a convenient location for everybody where there is enough stuff, which it's hard to have depending on what kind of home you live in, right? And how much space you have. So I often have to book a rehearsal space and get everybody at least some water or food and beverage during that rehearsal. And I may have to do some more of that if we're traveling, like I used to do with my band, right? So you kind of have to cut out a little bit of that revenue for hospitality, because the most important thing is you want everybody to enjoy, right? You want everybody to come away from it feeling like, oh, that was a great experience. I would happily do it again, at least for me. That's number one. And I will also set aside some for promotion, right? I want to get more people there because, again, what's the bottom line? That makes it more enjoyable, right? If there's more people there whom we want to share that time with. So once I cut out some hospitality and promotion expenses, I will then distribute the rest of it equally to each performer, including myself, right? So one way you could talk about that cynically is like, oh, well, you are taking a leader size fee and a bigger fee because but I'm spending this money with the intent of making the experience better for everybody. And it's my responsibility to take the time to do that because I organized the gig. It would be fine if other people were doing that as well, but I want to save them the time and the effort of having to think about that. I want to think about that for them. So that's why I cut that out first.
Totally. And I think that's so beautiful the way you say that you wanted to make it comfortable for everyone. Now, full disclosure, I know I said that, I take a equal cut all the time. I should be honest in saying that if it's a wedding and I have to go to a meeting and I gotta rent some stuff, and I'm driving around town, and I'm making sure that the bride is happy, because she's thinking about divorcing her husband, like, on the wedding day, and I'm, like, running around trying to get the olives in place and, like, make sure the hors d'oeuvres are out and hot, and then, it's raining, so I gotta move everything inside. If I'm busting my butt over here trying to make this happen, I will take a booking for specifically, and everyone knows this, like, for if I have to take time to go to a meeting, right, that's extra time. Like, I consider that gig time, right? But that's the only circumstance. That's the only circumstance I'll ever take a bigger cut. And it's not for the brand. It has nothing to do with me. It's only because I had to put extra time into coordinating that and making that happen and get the contracts all sorted out and such. But absolutely, in any other situation, right? It's like you say, it's like everyone's part of that team, right? And it's about making that team happen and trying to make sure everyone's got their credit for that. I just want to be honest before someone, says, oh, you took that one gig, Will. That one gig 3 years ago for that wedding. You took an extra $50 or whatever. It's like, yeah, because I had to go to 2 meetings. Anyway.
You know how you fit that into this framework that we were just talking about is you are putting your foot out there and somebody has asked you to spend extra time above and beyond working with them, and you are taking one for the team and going out there and spending that time to engage with that person.
You bet it's taking one for the team. I don't know if any of y'all out there who are listening have had the pleasure of playing for a wedding, which can be fun. It can be super fun, but it's also, you become part of the planning team, right? You become a part of that whole system, whether you're part of it for an hour or a day. It's there's a lot of pieces going on, right? So, buy a beer for your wedding planner people. Like, give them a hug. Those poor people are just sweating all the time.
So I asked you what makes a great restaurant gig. So can I also ask you what makes the perfect wedding gig?
Food. I'm going to say it again. I like to be fed. What makes the perfect wedding gig? Contrary to a restaurant gig, I like to get people dancing a little bit. I've got a short story for you. This was not a wedding. This was a debut. I believe it's in the Filipino tradition.
Gotcha.
I believe. So we were hired to do this birthday party at Steamworks downtown. And we were hired to do a little set, and then Alvin and Emilio Suarez, who was playing bass and cello, they were going to do a little pop set after. And we start playing, and of course, it's not the joke is it's not a Will Clements gig unless there's some Latin. So we're doing probably like Mas Que Nada. I think it was Mas Que Nada or something. And I announced, okay, the song is a little, it's a little sexy. So if you're feeling like you want to come to the dance floor and, pop it out a little bit, bring it on, or something like that. Something maybe a little more family friendly. I can't remember. And we're going, and it's like, smooth, and it's happening. And then this mature couple comes up, and they were adorable, and they're doing this kind of like, almost like cha-cha like thing, this like ballroom thing. And they were like amazing, and they were just like hitting it off and doing great and smiling, like just smiling. And the mom who booked us comes up to me, and she said, those are my parents. They've been divorced for like 4 years or in the process of getting divorced, or I don't know. It was like some sort of long process. And she said, I haven't seen them dance together in years. And I mean, it's kind of weird because, again, it was like kind of like a, kind of a sexy song, and like kind of like not maybe as romantic as some people like dream this situation would be, but it was like really adorable to see this couple like reunited or reacquainted, through music. And I think, to tie in your question, I think like a wedding just has kind of moments like that, where the family is just having a good time, and it's all about connecting.
So I got 2 more questions for you. One of them's kind of music-y, and the other one's kind of more family. Let's say you're working full-time as a teacher at a school, but you also want your creative life as artist and musician and vocalist, Will Clements. What help do you think you need to make sure that that can still happen?
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm not in that part of my career yet. So I think for me, this might sound a little preachy, but I think the biggest thing I'm going to need is to know for myself where to set those boundaries of leaving work at work. I've seen teachers throughout my life burn themselves out because they care so much about what they do that it become their hobby and their passions kind of become intertwined with their work. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's beautiful that that happens. But I think for those of us that want to continue our musical careers outside of teaching, it's going to be about what we do to set ourselves up for success. So I can't say there's like a specific service or something that's going to be my magical antidote to that, other than I think I'm going to need to know how much I want to invest where with my limited time that I will have. So I'm keeping that in mind because I want to be, someone who flourishes in my work. And I want to avoid burnout as much as I can. So I'm keeping my eyes open for that.
That's an interesting amount of segue into my last question for you today. Thanks for your time this afternoon,
Such
Will.
Interesting, fascinating conversation today. I'm enjoying this so much.
Me too, and it definitely deserves a follow-up once you've got a few years post practicums and you're out there teaching, right? We'll have to figure out how that's going. But I want to end with a question about somebody who has had just an enormous influence on me and is somebody I respect so much and I've had so much love for the last decade. But it's not even close to the influence that this person would have had on you. Tell me about growing up musically with your dad.
Well, full disclosure, my dad is a high school band teacher. A lot of the reason that's inspired me to become a music teacher myself. And I'm sure it's no secret that he was your band teacher back in the day at New West Secondary. Yeah, I mean, he's the guy who, when I was a kid, would put on Jaco Pastorius's The Chicken. And we would just dance all day to that, or would put on like Hungarian Dance Number 5, which was part of his concert band rep. And just like, I just remember dancing and dancing and dancing. Steely Dan, there was this band I loved called the Shuffle Demons from Toronto that are a sax ensemble. He always just found the coolest, wackiest, zaniest stuff that I still love to this day. And I think a lot of people have these connections maybe with their parents where they really fell in love with music through what their parents gave to them, But in my case, I mean, I had all that. Plus, I got to see him inspire many, many other people as a teacher. And I think that translates so beautifully into how I feel about teaching, which again is, helping people discover new things. And I feel so blessed to have the dad I do, and to see him, and I hope this doesn't come across as bizarre, but see him kind of become a light for a lot of people. I don't want to say a dad for other people, because I think that'd be like stepping a boundary a bit. But you know what I mean, knowing that guy. Like, he's just cares so much about wanting to be there for people, right? And I mean, it's so inspiring to be able to be a part of that, and to call him my dad, is beautiful. So
that is beautiful. Thanks, Will. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Will. Thanks you so much.
If you like this podcast, subscribe to get more from wherever you listen to podcasts. Give us a 5-star review if you can, and tell your friends to find the Rhythm Changes podcast in their app of choice. And if you really like this kind of thing, go to rhythmchanges.ca to learn more about what we do, or visit patreon.com/rhythmchanges to support us directly. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time on the Rhythm Changes podcast. Rhythm Changes is a Chernoff Music production.